Are they, the part about them not feeling vibration, it's not a fallacy, but if the jig's within, or their food's within about 2 or 3 mil of their body, they can feel the water change around them. They can't feel the vibration, but they can feel the water change around them. So the most important or fundamental part again, and I'll say this about 20 times now until the end, if they can't see it, they can't eat it. Okay, now, we're going to try and make it a bit easier to pick your jigs now, because you're probably wondering to yourself, what's the difference? What do I pick and when do I pick it now? Because it's got to make it more visible. Because they can see 3 of the 6 UV light spectrums we can't, at different stages of the day, we have different stages of UV light. Okay, at night, there's no UV. The moon don't throw much UV off. So don't think to yourself, if you're going to go and buy yourself a UV jig, it's going to be awesome at night, because it's just going to be pretty ordinary at night. Okay, they're designed for use during the day to use the best of the available light. Alright, now the trick is this. I want you to, everyone reckon it's a brown jig, yeah? To me that's a gold jig. Can everyone see underneath that gold reflection? That is the most important part of the jig. Forget the outside cloth. That's the secondary function. Okay? Just about every jig on a wall has a cloth of, a colour underneath, whether it be a foil or a stain in a clear body. Okay? That's to make it more visible. Why? Because different colours refract better at different stages of the day with different stages of UV light. Okay? So to make it really easy for you, forget the outside. Go to a wall and find, if you're going to fish mostly at night, you want to have a red foil, because red refracts light better than any other colour in low light. Okay, morning and afternoon, gold, because when that sun first starts peaking, the best UV spectrums come through, gold will refract better than any other colour. You fish during the day, all the other colours under the rainbow. Okay, that's as easy as it is. So if you're going to target squid predominantly at night or in the morning, or in the afternoon and at night, you want gold and red foils mostly. Okay, if you're going to fish morning and then into the day, or from the day into the afternoon, then you look at silvers for the high sun, or transparent jigs, or greens, or pinks, or purples, and gold to fill that afternoon space. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? So then why have we got an outside coating on it, or a colour on the outside? That just comes back to how clear the water is. Now if it's clear, we can see for about 40 metres in clear water, so pretty good vision. That looks like food. It looks like something they would naturally eat. So in clear water, I use something that's looking like food. In dirty water, we kind of go a bit ridiculous with some dry stuff, like such. Okay, so during the day, that's got a silver foil, I would use that. If the water was a little bit murky, not dirty, because dirty water's bad, but darker water, I would fish something brighter. Does that make sense? Cool. Don't believe what they tell you guys, size does matter. Does anyone here fish bait for squid? Yeah? You always sort of go for a nice chunky silver whiting or a tommy or something like that, yeah, or a mullet or a herring or a tail or something like that? Yeah? Anyone here use 2.5 size jigs? Now we just learned a couple of things. Squid can't eat it unless they can see it. So the smaller we make that jig, the harder it is for that squid to see it. Okay, we know they're a drive-through animal that would rather expel energy for a feed, not a snack. Okay, now when we do fish with bait, we fish with a bait sort of like that. That's a standard silver whiting next to a size 3.0 jig. Now ask yourself, why would I hang a dirty great big bait there to feed the same squid and then cast a jig that's only this big in the hope of catching that same squid? Don't get me wrong, 2.5 serve a very important purpose, and that's for catching bait this big. Okay, if you want to catch big food squid, fish with big jigs. I use these ones at times. That's not just a display, there's bite marks in the back of that I have used. And the squid I've caught with that have been from this size through to about this size. So, small squid will attack a big bait. Okay, they don't need to kill it to get a feed. They're only going to attach, take a bite and take off again. So anything they can get their tentacles around, they will have a feed on. If we make that profile of the jig a little bit bigger, the squid are more likely going to be able to see it. A lot of people seem to think too, if they use a 2.5 or a 2 or a 1.8 jig, it sinks a bit slower. You can get jigs now from every manufacturer just about that's in a slow sink. Okay, so you can still cover this. I know that with the Gangcraft slow sinks, I think we sold out of them last night, but they sink at the same rate as a 1.8. So a 3.5 jig sinks at the same rate as a 1.8 size jig. So we're still offering a big profile food, but it's sinking slower. We can fish it in shallower water and in stiller water. Okay, now when you're fishing with squid, the attack of that jig is going to happen in the sink when the jig's sinking. Not in the sink at home, that's where the missus cleaning the dishes. But when the jig's sinking is when they're going to attack it. So you want that jig to sink for as long as possible, but you also want it to get to the bottom. Okay, so finding that balance will work wonders. Eggy gear. Where are my rods, Ryan? A lot of people will probably ask the question, what's the difference between an eggy rod and like a normal plastic 2 to 4 or 1 to 4 kilo rod? We'll try and show you. This rod on the left is a 2 to 4 kilo plastics rod, and this one is an eggy rod. Can you just grab that jig off here and let it hang for me, mate? Don't catch on that old mate there on the knee. So, the reason we don't use a plastics rod is you can see instantly the difference in those two rods. One's quite labouring and loaded in the tip, especially once we put a little bit of load into them. You see the difference? Now, this rod on my left is designed to cast up to 6 grams. That jig is 24. So you kind of got to ask yourself the question, why would I use a rod that's designed to cast such a lightweight and chuck something that's more than up to 40 grams some of these jigs are? The rod's not designed to do it, and it will labour. You'll find you'll get your cast to about here, and you'll go, geez, that feels a bit heavy, and you'll just sort of lob it 20 feet away. You won't physically punch it and cast it away. That's because it's not designed to do that job. So I'm going to put that down for a minute before I break it. Good carpet, Ryan.
Like it?
Yeah. Thanks, mate. This is an eggy rod. It's one I'll use a fair bit. And that's about a $2,500 outfit. You don't need one. Okay, and if you're going to fish all the time, yeah, get good gear because you need it to last you a long time and you need it to be reliable. Okay, you don't need to spend $2,500 on a rod and a reel. Okay, yeah, it's great if you do have that gear, but you don't need it. Okay, one of the other things you need to look for when you're buying an eggy rod is power here. So this rod has lots. So I know when I need to cast, I can punch a jig as hard as I physically want to, and it's not going to labour. It's going to punch that jig. Another thing you'll notice about eggy rods, see how close the guides sit to the blank there? That's for a couple of reasons. These things are designed for people in Japan physically because that's where it all started and that's where it all comes from. They all fish land-based because it costs about 12 grand a year to own a boat and they don't have boat ramps everywhere like we do. So it's all about casting distance. Okay, now the closer the guides are to the blank means less line belly between your guides. The less line belly, the less friction, the further you're going to cast. Okay, now second of that is sensitivity. Somebody back there want to grab that for a sec? You can hold it. Now if you let that jig sink against the weight of the line, which is about that much tension, I'm not going to do much with this jig, I'm just going to tickle the side of it. Can you feel that in your hand?
Yep.
Now you can see I'm not pulling, I'm just tickling that jig. Okay, now when those guides are sitting close to the blank, there's less distance for that sensitivity signal to travel back to your hand. Okay, the further your guides are from the blank, the more distance it has to travel and you do lose a percentage of that. But most eggy rods you'll feel will do the same. Okay? Thanks, mate. Now if you do want to start looking at an eggy rod, something that is going to cast a jig and is going to work a jig, they start around that $100 mark, $100. And yeah, they do go to more than $1,000, but you don't need one. Okay, there's some awesome rods that you can pick up pretty cheap around that 150 mark, which are great for doing that purpose. And then you go through to the mid-range stuff. There's another rod I use all the time called an evergreen squid lure, which have been around for about 10 years, but only in Australia for about 6 weeks now, so I'm pretty lucky to get them much earlier on. They're another awesome, really good, strong, reliable rod. They go up to about 400, so you don't need to spend $1,000 on a rod. Okay, bear that in mind. Reels, that's an eggy reel. You don't need a Stella. You really don't. Just get yourself a 2500 size reel. Because when I start showing you the way that these jigs are meant to be worked as far as the action is concerned, you need to bring between 50 and 80 centimetres of line back on each retrieve. Okay? So that's what neggy reel is. But again, I'll say, you don't need to spend $1 million, but buy the best you can afford, because there's a couple of important things like bail rollers. If that doesn't work when you're using braided line, anyone here ever heard of an air knot? Nothing to do with the line. It's got everything to do with your reel. Okay? I get about one air knot every 3 years. And that's because I haven't serviced my reels and they're not working properly. Get yourself something that's got strong gears, because the amount of work and the amount of retrieves you're going to do every time you go squid fishing, you do need something reliable. Now, I use a couple of different reels. We actually did some charter stuff in Melbourne where we did clinics taking people out squid fishing. And if anyone is ever going to have that idea, make sure you've got some safety glasses, because people forget to let them sink and you will get smacked in the head with squid jigs and rods. But we used a few different rods and a few different reels, and a couple of brands did stand out about the others. I'm not here to promote brands too much tonight, so I'm not going to get into it. If you want to ask me later, I'm more than happy to tell you what they were. And we did blow up some $800 rods weekly as well, $800 reels weekly as well. So expensive doesn't always mean it's the best for that purpose. Okay, so there is a reason why there are certain eggy reels. That's because the gears are designed to be worked and worked hard, and they've got really, really good roller bearing properties. Line, that's braid, folks. That's it. No, not quite. There is some specific eggy line. How many people here have ever been done by a squid on reef? Yeah, that doesn't happen. It hasn't happened to me yet anyway. Eggy line is generally not an 8-ply line. It's generally a 4 to a 6, because you don't need that extra abrasive resistance properties. And by making it with less strands, you can make that line lighter, which means you can cast it further and it sinks through the water better. So that, if anyone wants to have a play with that later on, that's about 20-pound braid. It's about the same size as most 4 pounds, 4 to 6 pounds. So there are specific braids that are designed to be smaller and lighter with less strands, but less abrasive resistance, and this is one of them. So that's Gosen line, that one there that we use. That one there is not actually available in Australia, but the other ones on every other reel are. You can come and have a look at them later as well if you like. But again, you don't need to spend millions on line. That's $140 for 100 metres. You don't need it. Okay, just stick to the basics and buy what you can afford. Okay. Scents and sprays. Before I said something about squid not having a nose, so you've got to sort of ask yourself again, why are these companies selling me these things that stink? Like that. It's a spray all over my jig. I use it, you can see, because it's got it. But why would I? Because squid don't have a nose. Well, those two candles that they reach out and touch food with, they've got cells on them very similar to our taste buds. So you ever seen squid come up and sort of knock at your jig? They're not hungry, they're just curious. But if you make it taste like food, they're more likely to come back and embrace that jig. Now, I don't use it all the time because it's not cheap, and I don't like buying stuff that's not cheap. But if you use it sparingly, it'll work really well. If you use it occasionally, it'll work really well. If you're going to go squid fishing and the squid are just jumping all over your jigs every time you go, no need to use a $20 spray to attract a squid that's already attracted to your jig, and you don't need to coat it. Just a little bit. Alrighty. The other one that gets me is stuff like that. It says the word glow on it. Glomax. I don't know if Ryan sells it, but yeah, it says glow. How many of us would use that at night? I wouldn't, because it's just a UV enhancer. And there's no UV coming off the moon. So that's not the only one you can get. I'm sure he's got one here. So have you got any UV stuff?
We've got the shrimp spray.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
UV with shrimp impregnation.
Yep. And as an idea, the idea isn't to make that whole jig UV luminescent, so to speak. You just want to create a contrast by using the light you've got. So I normally hold a jig like such with my fingers, and I'm not going to spray it, and I just spray over that jig. And then I create lines of contrast rather than a solid iridescent colour, because a contrast is going to work better than just one solid glow.